the community hub. I did an interview there. Just pretty much the convention center and just trying to eat barbecue and tacos.
Barbecue is good.
Barbecue is really good. We went to, oh, we're good? Hey, we're here at Pivotal Spring One Platform Conference, and my guest today is Olga Kundzich. And Olga is a senior product manager for Spinnaker at Pivotal. Olga, great to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me here.
Well, you're very welcome. So we want to talk about Spinnaker, but I have a first question for you. You know, we talk a lot about continuous delivery, and the definition is pretty well set. You know, it's continuous development, right? But what does it mean to you, and like, what are those kind of dynamics of it that you think about in your everyday work? Because it still has to be continuous. You really can't stop. I think that's what you were saying beforehand.
So my thinking about continuous delivery kind of evolved over time. And what we began to realize that with cloud-native applications, like, you cannot stop on just delivering. You have to extend to operating your application in production, right? The delivery of your application is only some sort of change. There's a cloud-native infrastructure is not guaranteed. It has SLAs. The distributed systems change, and one part can impact another. So we are thinking that, you know how we have these circles?
Yeah.
There is a CI circle and CD circle, and they feed into each other. We think that you have to extend it with another circle, the operate circle.
Oh, okay.
And then all of this again feed into each other, but continuous delivery encapsulates both the deploy and operate circles. And that's where Spinnaker kind of sits.
Oh, interesting.
It's, we think of it as like turning monitoring into action. It's a kind of a bridge between your assets, application assets running into cloud-native platforms, and your monitoring systems.
Well, that's a good take. I like that, kind of that flow then, right?
Right.
We were actually seeing a slide in one of the presentations earlier from Cornelia Davis about this flow and how we have moved from a static world to much more of a world that's about that declarative state, right? That desired state, really.
Right.
And that speaks to that flow, doesn't it?
Somewhat. We can develop these ideas even further, where like imperative flow is applicable versus the declarative flow is applicable. For example, software release process, the pipelines that encapsulates your software release process. It's a business process of releasing applications with safety, compliance, and security.
Right.
Right. And those are much simpler to encapsulate with an imperative process, so we have a template for your software release, which organizationally specific.
Right.
Right. So do this, then that. Put this in this environment, run this test. Put it in this environment, run this. Then finally do maybe a canary on it, and then release to production. But deployment into an environment, you want to have it completely declarative.
Right.
So that you have a record of what that in, and that's where you can leverage Kubernetes declarative machinery to maintain the state desired and actual.
Excellent, excellent. So I see where you're going with that. And you know, one of the things that we're talking about now is like how security has to be fit into that flow, doesn't it? And I think you're kind of stating that, and how kind of our context about security is changing quite a bit, isn't it?
Right, and you both want to kind of prioritize security and put it in your CI processes as early as possible, as well as you want to monitor your assets and understand if your production environment is actually impacted by a new CVE when it arises, right? So in that, where the inventory of your assets is up to date is very important, which is also something that Spinnaker provides in addition to pipelines.
So maybe one thing that would be help clarify is this, one more time, this relationship between the declarative and the imperative. So the imperative, you talked about the template-based kind of approach, doing the tests, making sure that they're, things are working as they should be. And then the declarative aspect of it would be what exactly then?
it's the spec per environment of
Right.
what you want to have in the environment deployed.
Right. Okay. Okay,
It's
great.
manifest in Cloud Foundry, manifest in Kubernetes.
Right. Okay. So let's move on to Spinnaker, because I know you spent the past, I think you were saying the past 2 years working on Spinnaker, and we were talking a little bit about the background of Spinnaker. Maybe you could just help people understand Spinnaker's background and how it's developed over the past 2 years or so.
Right, so Spinnaker originated at Netflix when they were breaking down their own monolith and going to AWS. And they quickly realized that the AWS console is not the right level of abstraction to expose to application developers to provision infrastructure for the applications. Sort of too much detail, the layout is not right. So they developed a dashboard, Asgard. Then they also needed pipelines and for promoting your artifacts over environments. So they scrapped that and developed a product, Spinnaker, from scratch, incorporating these lessons learned from doing other tools. Then they open sourced it together with Google in 2015.
Right.
The community grew, and Pivotal started to contribute in 2018. We are the third largest contributor to Spinnaker open source. The Spinnaker was contributed to Continuous Delivery Foundation this year to kind of formalize the governance of the product. It has a very big community of contributors. We have a Spinnaker Summit that's coming for the third year this year.
Oh, yeah.
It's right before KubeCon.
Oh, good.
North America.
Day zero in San Diego?
Right.
Okay.
So if you want to come early and join us, it's a fantastic event. I really enjoyed my time there last year.
Excellent. So Spinnaker, tell us about its architecture. What makes it unique compared to other types of environments, to other peers that you might find?
So Spinnaker is specialized continuous delivery tool integrated with monitoring, right? That's how it was developed. A lot of other solutions, people when start with continuous delivery, it's the emphasis on delivery pipeline, and there's a tendency to extend CI systems and to delivery with them as well. It does not scale. It's a good way to get started, and at least you have automation and records of what's going on. But Spinnaker is for managing microservices at scale integrated with monitoring. Again, it has both inventory view applications that's built by pulling from the environments and create the layout, the dashboard on top of them that allows you to see at a glance how your application is doing across all of the environments that you may have. And Spinnaker is multi-cloud, right? It's GCP, AWS, Azure, Kubernetes, Cloud Foundry. All of these environments can be plugged into a single Spinnaker. You can drill down, see the health of your applications across environments. And if monitoring system alerts you that something is going wrong with your application, you can quickly see which instances are impacted and then go back into Spinnaker and do some corrective actions, such as roll back your application, scale, terminate instances, take them out of load balancers so you can troubleshoot them, right? And then, so that's very important, right? That component that a lot of other systems do not have.
Right.
And pipelines as well consist of stages, which are like high-level infrastructure management pieces, like deploy, like scale, roll back, map routes, all of these things that are implemented kind of in consistent way across cloud providers, presenting the right level of abstraction for application developers to work with. So for example, if you want blue-green, you go into your deployment stage and click a button, say, I want a blue-green deployment strategy.
Oh, it's very simple in that respect.
Right. And then also has a lot of guardrails. Netflix slogan, we want to build guardrails, not gates.
Yes.
So lots of guardrails so that you don't fail with your continuous delivery, like from very simple like manual judgments, conditional logic, like if this deployed successfully, then I want to do this. If didn't deploy successfully, I want to maybe roll back or something else. Canary analysis is a guardrail, again, making sure you don't deploy something that degrades service to end user. Run jobs, these stages that allows you to run like integration tests or some other tests along your application. And Spinnaker, again, is a stateful system.
Yeah.
And the pipeline is stateful
Right.
as well, so it knows which artifacts it received,
Right.
what triggered the deployment, which deployments we created as we promoted artifacts across environments, who approved manual judgments, right? So all of this state can be output, and helpful for compliance and audit.
Okay. Okay. That's a really good description. Thank you very much. That's really excellent.
Hopeful.
Yeah. Well, the question I have is, and this is always a question I'm interested in, is, everything comes from somewhere, right?
Right.
So Spinnaker comes out of Asgard, and Kubernetes came out of Google, right? And there's always trade-offs when you start building an architecture in an open source community, because it's already been built in many ways inside this company for their own specific needs and
Right.
and requirements. What are some of the trade-offs that have been had to make with Spinnaker so it can be adapted for a larger community?
Maybe I tell you a story of Kubernetes implementation
Okay.
with Spinnaker. So Spinnaker also originated before Kubernetes, right? And
Right.
there used to be primarily VM-based deployments.
Right.
When Kubernetes became a thing, and Google was a very early contributor to Spinnaker, they decided to incorporate Kubernetes as well. We've had Kubernetes support for like 4 years or something.
Mm-hmm.
And the very first provider that they developed was similar, took the same abstractions that Spinnaker had for VMs and applied them to Kubernetes. So we developed something that we currently call Kubernetes V1 provider. So it used like Kubernetes API to deploy, create your applications, was very VM-based. And the community didn't like that because Kubernetes is a flexible system.
Mm-hmm.
It's a platform for building platforms. Everyone's Kubernetes clusters are not the same. You want to deploy different resources into Kubernetes
Right.
clusters, not just applications, like things like namespaces,
Right.
configs, marks, secrets that you need. So more broader resource model than what Spinnaker had for applications at the time. So the community kind of requested that this was been redone, and for the past 2 years, we've developed something called Kubernetes V2 provider, which is manifest-based. It can deploy any manifest into Kubernetes. Like I said, it's important that deployment into environment is fully declarative and you have a record of it. And the only thing that we will help you with is with managing your manifests and help you kind of when you, let's say you have an application, you have 3 environments, dev, test, prod, your manifests are going to be almost the same, except that you may be in this environment you have 3 instances, and in this environment you have 10 instances, and so forth. Like very small changes. And let's say now you have 10 applications, and they're, again, dev, test, prod, manifests, right? And then they start to drift across each other, and you have,
Right.
you have manifest hell. That's what we live in right now.
Yeah, yeah.
So Spinnaker will help you manage that if you want.
With that configuration drift, so to speak?
Not specifically that, but we can help you treat this manifest as templates with variables inside, so you can have the same manifest across the environments and specify in this variable resolve to 3 instances, to 10 instances here, to another number of there, right? So that's, and also if you want to help to manage your application rollouts with Spinnaker deployment strategies, blue-greens, rather than the Kubernetes native rolling blue-green. You can also have a checkbox in the stage where you deploy manifest saying, I want blue-green. I let Spinnaker manage route for me. I'm going to deploy with replica sets and specify some other characteristics that you want.
Right. And that then speaks to the value of Spinnaker because it was built, for as a stateful technology.
Right.
And that then allows to be able to have those replica sets, in Kubernetes. So that speaks to the integration of it, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it speaks to evolution and working with open source
Right.
and taking feedback from the community and improving over time.
Right. And so now you must get a lot of feedback from your customers, too, about it, and who may also be out in the open source community. What is some of that feedback that you're getting from customers? What is it? How are you working with customers now so they can find the best way for them to use Kubernetes and integrated with Spinnaker to take advantage of, really what you're talking about here?
So it's early days for Spinnaker at Pivotal. We are just offering it as a beta, restricted beta today. So my conversation with customers to date, a lot of them were explorative. Some customers we were able to work with as an early adopters with our alpha implementations and receive feedback like that, but the primarily conversation were explorative, like what do you have in your environment, how Spinnaker can help. Let's do proof of concept, let's try to put it in the environment. So our customers are primarily, or the people that I talk to, the users of Cloud Foundry Foundation. A lot of them are fairly new to Kubernetes. They're looking into it, they want to adopt it. Spinnaker itself, sort of number one recommendation from Spinnaker community is to run Spinnaker itself on top of Kubernetes. So we've adopted this practice and we recommend our customers, we don't want to fragment the community, so we went with this recommendation because we also have a Kubernetes offering and our customers can also run Spinnaker on Kubernetes. So they're exploring Kubernetes alongside exploring Spinnaker, and it kind of causes additional challenges that Spinnaker wouldn't have had they also been familiar with Kubernetes. And it kind of drives the adoption of Kubernetes as well.
Interesting. And so then I think about kind of, when something is new, I think to anyone, it affects you in your own work. It affects the people around you and their work. How has this newness then, changed the way you work and changed the way your teams are managed, or how are you adapting to that? And then I'm curious on how you then bring that learning back to people who are just getting started, the ones who you're talking about, who are trying to understand kind of these very, complex topics simultaneously.
So we're working on new product introduction, right? So it's a challenging thing to do.
Yeah.
So the way we work is that we are very small, like me as a product manager and engineers and sometimes part-time technical writer that we love because we need to improve docs.
Yeah.
Right, so...
always the docs.
Always the docs, for some reason. So we are very flexible in the way we work. We have goals that we want to reach, but we don't plan them very tightly ahead because we know customers may come up with questions. We want to help them answer that. So we want to prioritize and be very flexible. We work directly with customers because the rest of the organization is not familiar with the product to the same degree as we are. So we get direct feedback from them, and we can share our best practices or what we've learned ourselves with them directly as well. So that's the way we work with them.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And so now that you're in the process of working with, in Spinnaker, and you must be getting to know the Spinnaker community a little bit. Can you tell us about the community out there and how you're participating in it, and what you're finding from the open source community out there that's working with Spinnaker?
Like I mentioned, the community is fairly large, from small startups to large enterprises to, of course, Netflix and Google being one of the main contributors. Right. We've joined the community. We participate in special interest groups. We have Kubernetes security, UI, what else? Declarative delivery we are working on in these areas. We've been working primarily, our contributions were in integration with Cloud Foundry, that's very feature rich.
Right.
Then we've worked on enabling different artifact stores. We contributed Artifactory and Netflix integrations.
Okay.
Again, like I said, it's a stateful system, so you want to get versions of applications and trace them across as they propagate across environments. And we've started to contribute to security. So integrated Spinnaker with Spring Cloud config servers to manage credentials securely. There's some work that's ongoing in that area to make it, to integrate that with more accounts. We're looking into more monitoring integrations, for example, Wavefront that VMware has. We will be also working on, like Spinnaker right now is best for stateless RESTful microservices. As application matures and different application practices become standard, like streaming applications, we want to improve Spinnaker and add additional coordination for managing and deploying those type of applications. Can't remember now. Like building more artifact traceability in the product, a lot of enterprise, whatever audit trace of things, enabling compliance, more like enterprise focus.
So when you're thinking about, the community and these different, features of it that we're discussing here, some of the things that, we were researching in particular relate to the application control plane. Is there something about the application control plane that makes Spinnaker unique?
So think again the origin as a dashboard, right? When you go, let's say, into AWS console and you want to provision your application, you will jump into networking tab, do something, provision your VMs, do with that, provision your firewall. You have to switch and go all over the place, right? So as an app developer, it's not the right way of provisioning things for you. So this is what we call application-centric control plane. You log into Spinnaker. For example, you're an application developer. You're allowed access to these 5 applications. So you see them in the screen. You can click on the top level. You see an application has been deployed across different environments. And all of these, like networking, VMs, or Kubernetes deployments or replica sets are all on the same screen across all of these environments. And with some actions that you can create on them, with the, like you can click on a deployment object in Kubernetes and see the YAML of how it was deployed, right? So it's make some maybe corrective actions if you like, look at your pipeline. So it's all in the same screen for you, rather than have it to jump all over the place.
And when I think of Spinnaker and the other research that we did, there is also again the concept of the interactive CD pipeline as well. Is that a unique feature to?
What do you mean by interactive?
Well, as I understand it, it's like it shows the pipeline actually. It allows you to be able to show the continuous delivery pipeline. It gives you that view of it. What is it? I mean, and Pivotal often talks about the developer experience and empowerment.
Right.
And so I'm looking for angles that relate to that, right? So is the pipeline something that makes it, that provides a usability for Spinnaker? Does it provide that capability to think of it, as, in terms of the developer experience?
Yeah, so Spinnaker has an advantage here over like watching just a generic CI pipeline that also does deployments. Again, like as I mentioned, like a developer would, in Spinnaker would be able to go into pipeline and see how artifacts flow through the pipeline, which artifacts are in which environment are being deployed, right, and the state of them. It also helps you with things like manual judgments, something that can deploy. You can take a look at the state of it and then say, okay, I'm good with it, and continue. Canary analysis is a built-in stage, so it will show you, extract the metrics and show you how it did canary analysis, the results of it. You can see how different applications function. So for example, when you just start with canary analysis, maybe you created this stage, put manual judgment after, so you could validate it, and when you poked around and make sure that it performs and you gain confidence in it, you just remove the manual judgments and things starts flowing.
That's helpful. I wanted to talk with you more about best practices, but I think we're running out of time.
Okay.
So we'll save that for perhaps the Spinnaker Summit in San Diego. We'll maybe follow up there. But thank you very much, Olga, for taking the time to talk with us.
Thank you. It was great to share.
Great. Have a good show.